Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Jim Lee's WildC.A.T.s #2, cover dated October 1992. So this came out 1 year after Adjectiveless X-Men #1, the best-selling single issue of any comic book ever. WildC.A.T.s #2 would have done good numbers as well, but not quite as good as X-Men #1. The cover here, of course, by Jim Lee and Scott Williams. And I think this one is coloured by Joe Rosas. He's not the interior colourist. Talk a little bit more about that in a minute when I get to the credits page. And of course, this is one of these kind of foil, hollow foil covers here. So if I just kind of move the cover around, you should see that. The effect, I think it's pretty cool. Obviously, it raised the cover price from issue 1, which was $195, and there was no enhanced cover, to $250. But it's nice. I like it. And now, what's also interesting is that some of the figures on this cover have been cribbed or pasted, so to speak, from an interior page. And I'll talk about that when I get to that page. Because if I open this one up to the credits page here, we see that Jim Lee is credited as co-creator, writer, and penciler. Brandon Choi, co-creator, writer. Scott Williams, inker. Let's move that over a bit. Mike Heisler, letterer. And now Joe Chiodo on board as colorist, replacing Joe Rosas, who was the colorist of issue #1. And you can see already on this first page here that these colors are very dark compared to Joe Rosas's colors in issue 1. And even though Chiodo is talented and he's really going for it in this issue, I don't like the way that the colors printed on the page. And that may have been down to a miscommunication with the printer, because I think subsequent issues of the series, the colors lighten up a little bit. And that was a problem for some of the early Image comics, an oversaturation of colors on the paper, and resulting in kind of murky looking art sometimes. So here on the inside cover page, we also get a little editorial from Jim Lee, where he talks about how the book is 4 or 5 weeks late. The first issue was cover dated August, so there was no issue out in September. It was 5 weeks late. And the reason for that is he welcomed his first child, his daughter, born on July 17, 1992. So that's why he was delayed. Lots of sleepless nights taking care of a newborn. And that's fair, excuse me, and that is fair enough, to be honest. But he says down here that he had neither the time nor the energy to work on the comic, but somehow it managed to get done and into your hands. Ignore the fact that all the artwork in this issue is pasted up, composite work taken from issue 1. That's a bit of a joke, but there is pasted up composite work from issue #1 in this. So he was cutting some corners. And you can see here too in the credits, Carl Alstatter and John Ty, Homage Studios colleagues of Jim Lee's, credited with background ink assists, helping out Scott Williams. So obviously they were doing their best to turn this one around as quickly as possible and get it to the printers. And he talks about here, he says, I hope at some point to finish the miniseries, but right now I've got to go and change some diapers. But P.S. he's joking. WildC.A.T.s #3, the conclusion, will definitely be coming out in November. It didn't. And we still have here in the fine print that the series is billed as #2 of 3. There would be 4 issues to conclude the first storyline. And we also have the little caveat here: any similarities to persons living or dead is purely coincidental. But the similarity to Dan Quayle, Vice President of the USA, is hardly coincidental in the inside of this issue, the same that it wasn't coincidental when it came to issue #1. So the title, excuse me, of this story is Revelations, and we pick up just after midnight on August 9th. This is at the end, picking up story-wise from the end of the previous issue. So we see Lynch here in his international operations headquarters, and they're getting this reading of, what is it again, quantum sonic field anomalies. And they've got their own sonic operatives, such as this guy here, and he's not able to deal with it. So a red flag goes up in Georgetown. Lynch calls for a shuttle to get to the site, or if not exactly the site, rather the crisis control center. So there he is en route, and here we get the first of these paste ups from issue number 1. So I'm pulling out issue number 1 there, and there you can see. Just make sure this is all on camera for you. See that? So we have this panel here reproducing this one here in this kind of shard layout. We've got the guy here, Colby and Lynch. There you go, from issue 1. And we have down here our top-down view of them, looking at the monitor of the crater in Georgetown. And then we Void popping in, Lynch looking at that. But here in issue number 2, we see the silhouettes of the Wildcats, which we didn't see in issue number 1. And that is because it's a different timeline that will get explained later in the issue. So, yeah, Jim Lee, honest there, even though he was joking about everything being a paste-up composite, honest about the repurposed art. And here's the splash page. So we've got Void, and she is trying to teleport out the Wildcats team, including Grifter and Zealot, from the site of an explosion, this explosion in Georgetown. And what we have here is Jim Lee using the art on the splash page for the cover. So we see that he has in effect traced the figure of Void to the cover, and he's done a little bit more detail on the face. And for Jim Lee, if you watch any of his videos where he talks about his art process and also shows us his drawing and inking techniques, he talks about how the face is the most important feature of any of his drawings, and how he attends in particular to the eyes. So the eyes get a lot more attention on the cover here. Also, in terms of reconfiguring images and from the splash page, this drawing of Zealot is reversed, but it is in effect, it is the same drawing, the exact same drawing on the cover, so traced. And the drawing here of Spartan is traced and reconfigured to be Warpath. So he takes this central part, Void, Zealot and Spartan, reverses it, traces it for the cover, and then we do get all new drawings of Voodoo, Imp and Spartan. So there you go. So that's another indication of the degree to which Jim Lee was under the deadline gun, and also struggling because of the birth of his daughter, his firstborn. And so we also get dialogue that we had there in issue 1, repeated here in these panels. But what happens is Void is successful, gets them up to Merv, that is Imp and Spartan's ship or shuttlecraft. And we get some explanations here. If I turn this to the horizontal, so here we are at the in the cockpit of Merv, and we get this kind of catch up in respect of who IO are, and Grifter gives an explanation. They're cutting edge spy tech, specialize in blind eye covert operations here and abroad. And we get a question from Maul to Voodoo about how did she know to get the team out of there, and she explains, the moment was a timeline nexus from what I thought was a dream, and we saw that in issue number 1. I realize now that I have in fact come back in time from a timeline where I made my decision too late. All of you died in the explosion because of my mistake, and that was in issue number 1, and that's the page I just showed you. So Maul asks the question, so does that mean we just created a new timeline? and Void doesn't give an answer to that. So here we get a good shot of their shuttlecraft, and basically Grifter tells them that he's got a safe house near Quantico, and Jacob Marlowe Emp takes the offer and says to Grifter to give the coordinates to Spartan. Let's hope no one's noticed our little joyride tonight. But their joyride has been noticed. One of the psyops at IO died in relation to trying to trap Void at international operations. This character here says Tyrrell must have channeled into the rogue's size dimensional jump, that's Void, when he was running a QP, that's a quantum sonic field scan. So we've got all this kind of tech jargon throughout the issue. Wildstorm was particularly rife with tech jargon, something that has to do with the taste of Jim Lee, and in particular probably Brandon Choi, I think, a scripter of this issue. So we get a lot of kind of explanation of all of that kind of stuff, and Lynch really just wants to get a location on the Wildcats still in range of their sensors, and this operative says that they're on it. They've triangulated an area north of Fredericksburg, right about there, and so Lynch gives the order, activate Black Razor 1, it's time to pay a surprise visit of our own. So too late, Emp. There is a Black Razor team on your trail. And here we've got this interesting ad here featuring Emp, recommending voting in the 1993 US election in November. And back to the story though, Quantico, 1 AM, and this is the safe house that Grifter has given Spartan the coordinates for, and so here they are in this warehouse. The colors on this page are particularly dark and murky, so this is not a successful example of Chiodo's work. And here is Maul holding up Merv as Spartan works on repairing the ship or maintaining the ship. And then we've got this interview here between Marlowe, Zealot and Grifter, and we get some explanation regarding what is going on. So Zealot knows about Project Reunification, and if it comes about, if Hellspawn gets his way with Project Reunification, the survival of all mankind will be in jeopardy. And Marlowe says and asks, and nobody else has done anything about this? Come on, somebody in the government must know. Grifter says somebody does, and that somebody is a high-level mole for the Cabal. These past 4 years, the mole's been disguising reunification as a top-secret research project, and it's going active soon. We don't have a whole lot of time on our side. So what's that supposed to mean? Obvious question, and Zealot explains. I like this shot of Zealot. I like the shading here, the silhouette, and just the little details of her ear in the light. The Cabal is constructing a dimensional gateway from Damon, their homeworld, to Earth. And to locate reunification, Brother Grifter and I needed to find this mole. So who is the mole? Well, here we've got Voodoo watching TV. We've got Dan Quayle, Vice President, on TV. And Voodoo has the power to recognize Damonites while possessing human hosts. We saw that in issue 1. And it's also said here that she has the power to exorcise Damonites from human hosts. So Voodoo sees Dan Quayle as a Damonite, and this shocks Emp, who says him, that chucklehead. So Zealot, more serious, says, Lord Emp, if this man truly is the mole, then we must act now to stop him and the Cabal. So here we're going to get an explanation of what is going on generally. This is a really nice page here. I like the 3-panel layout, the top to bottom art. It looks good. And also, just zoom in here with your eyes on these screens. So we've got Dan Quayle, but we've also got Stimpy of Ren and Stimpy. We've got Wolverine going up against Magneto, and we've got Batman up there as well. So pretty cool, those little Easter eggs on those television screens. And now here's something that I feel we should have gotten in issue number 1, which is an overarching explanation of what's going on, who these cherubim are, daemonites, etc. So Zealot explains here, eons ago, cherubim explorers and damonite marauders were stranded on this planet, that's Earth. Cut off from our homeworlds, many of the cherubim, like Lord Emp and myself, assimilated into the human population, and here they are presumably, thousands of years ago in the past. The daemonites, however, and this is a daemonite here, merely saw Earth as a plentiful source for host bodies, a rich colony for their empire. During the ensuing blood wars between our two races, humanity suffered as cherubim and daemonite established balance of power. 30 years ago, however, we suffered a terrible defeat that upset the balance. Now the daemonites are ready to deliver the killing blow to both cherubim and mankind. And so, we now seek the gifted ones, the human cherubim hybrid descendants, such as yourself, she's addressing Voodoo, Warblade and Maul. Without your help, the daemonites will surely take this world as their own. So, like I said, I really feel that we should have gotten this information in issue number 1, and or issue number 1 should have been double-sized, and we get this part of the story as well. Because number 1 was just too mysterious. It was like, who's this, what's this, kind of hinting at things. And I feel a number 1 issue, you need much more information about who the characters are, what their basic story is, in order to give new readers proper bearings in relation to a new story world and team. So what happens then is we get a switch of scene to Hellspawn here. He's the leader of the Damonite contingent and the Cabal on Earth. Here he's got Pike, who's one of his enforcers and half Damonite, half human. And this chap McCoy, now he featured in issue number 1 here on the very first page, and this is him here in Antarctica in 1980 collecting this orb, and that's what he's been up to. He's been hunting down these orbs that are capable of powering an interdimensional gateway from Daemon to Earth. And he says of this latest orb, which NASA has acquired and which Dan Quayle possessed, or Damonite possessing Dan Quayle is looking to get access to. McCoy says here, the latest orb is the largest of all the ones I've seen, and it is yet to anthropomorphize itself. So that's interesting. So these orbs take on humanoid form. He says here, once we breach its containment bond, it shall be the catalyst to open the dimensional gate. So Hellspawn responds, then all that remains is for Belial to deliver it from NASA's vault. And Pike here shouts, Belial, that megalomaniac's our mole. So Belial is the Damonite possessing Dan Quayle. Hellspawn says, watch your words, Pike. Keep in mind that he obtained not only the federal funding required to build this facility, but also the orb itself from NASA. You and the Coda have a much easier task. Belial will arrive shortly. Make sure no one gets in our way. So Pike and the Coda are tasked with ensuring security from Zealot and Grifter. So then we switch back to the Quantico safe house, Grifter's safe house, that warehouse. We've got a little training game going on here, reminiscent of the X-Men in the Danger Room. So Zealot getting the better of Warblade here. We see his powers in action because we didn't really learn very much about him, and actually still haven't in this issue and won't in this issue, but we can see him stretching there. So he's got some kind of stretching power like Mr. Fantastic. See the length of his neck here from the blow that Zealot delivers to the back of his head. Maul gets the better of Zealot, but Zealot is has obviously got heightened senses, and she hears the Razor team communicating with each other outside of the warehouse. Someone's outside the building, and she goes for her swords. And then this Black Razor team enters the warehouse, and so we've got a fight coming up. I always like this trope of Jim Lee's where you get a top-down shot of characters running a vertical length of the page. So you see that a lot in his X-Men work. I like it, and this looks well here. Now, this I don't like. We've got this card insert here for how to send away for Image Comics number 0, and or 0 rather, and that would take a long time for Image Comics 0 to ever come out. And the problem with this, and I'm going to try and hold this in such a way, now my hand is in the way there, that you might be able to see the double page spread. So we've got Maul there reaching across onto the second page, Grifter here with his guns, Emp here looking up at one of those black razors. This is a pretty cool shot of Zealot punching this guy out, and she is up for the fight. We fight until victory or death. So Grifter, great action shot of him here in this anchor image, and he thinks here, damn, the runt can't lead for shit. Sorry, excuse me. Well, I guess that's what it is here. I'll have to run this show myself. And that's a nice little character bit, because in issue number 1, Emp isn't the greatest at leading the team in combat situations. He rather fancies himself as a leader, but he really doesn't cut it in conflict situations. So Grifter taking over, giving the orders, and then this Black Razor grabs a hold of Voodoo, but then she manifests this very interesting power. It's like her forearm turns into almost a werewolf's claw. It looks hairy there, and but then she's grabbed psychically, it seems, and this guy threatens to wipe her mind out permanently. Emp in action here, blowing out, kneecapping this guy in a suit, and then he's got his pistol to the guy's head, and then Lynch arrives in. That's a pretty cool view of Lynch there at a Dutch angle as well, and I like the shading and lighting on his face too. And Marlowe recognizes Lynch, and Grifter is surprised at that, because as he says here, I thought you'd never heard of IO. So Emp was simply looking to see how much did Grifter and Zealot know about IO. So Lynch here says he needs Emp's help. And so there they are, having a tete-a-tete in an office in the warehouse. And Lynch says, I've been tracking it down for years. This is reunification, the reunification project, but I've always gotten tied up in bureaucratic red tape. I never imagined that the Cabal could have an insider mole shutting me down. Tell me who it is, Marlowe, and maybe I can help you. So Marlowe asks him, how do I know that you're not working with the mole? Simple, you'd be dead and we wouldn't be having this conversation. So tough guy talk. Now I like this little detail here. We've got this little calendar opened up at October on the wall. We see it here behind Lynch, and then we see it in the close-up here, the close-up on Lynch's face as well. So I like that little bit of continuity in terms of the interior of the office here, even though there isn't much in the way of backgrounds in this issue. And again, that's down to the fact that Jim Lee is trying to get this to the printers as quickly as possible. So Lynch basically boils it down to Emp that he's not giving him much choice. He'll take everything away from Emp unless he cooperates. So presumably they cooperate. And then we switch scenes to this facility, this astronomics facility, and we have the arrival of Vice President Dan Quayle, flanked by Pike and Akoda. And here he is, like in his Damonite persona. He's fed up of Pike's commentary. Pike here saying, you've got to be joking. Sorry, first of all, Quayle here boasting, Quayle Damonite boasting that he's brought his own caretakers, one of the fringe benefits of his job, and Pike recognizes who they are, who he's referring to. You've got to be joking. Those media hounds couldn't fight their way out of a bad commercial. Who's he referring to? We'll see very shortly. So Damonite Quayle responds violently, that's enough out of you, Pike. and he boasts here about he's the one who has made reunification possible, and says don't cross him again. I like this storytelling in these 4 panels here, nicely done by Lee. And then we see Spartan, Maul and Voodoo coming in to the same facility, and then there's a security alert goes off because the Wildcats have been picked up by the security surveillance systems. Maul punches his way, or actually it looks like he kind of butts his way through the wall, throwing Pike flying there. This is a nice image, nice anchor image here. But Pike isn't down, and he takes on Maul, but he's blasted here by, who could it be? It's a bioblast from Spartan. He says here, the kid may not be a professional killer like you, Pike, but I guarantee the 2 of us are more than a match for you. Then the Coda goes into action, and she rips off Spartan's arm, because of course Spartan is a synthetic humanoid robot type. And so he's able to survive that. Maul blasts the Coda here with his fist up against the wall, and he gets his hand around Quayle Damonite's throat. And I like this little comical bit here. Okay, Mr. Potato Head. And again, that's yet another reference to that infamous Dan Quayle correcting a kid's spelling of potatoes on a classroom whiteboard or blackboard, and never allowed to forget it either. So, and then here we get our splash of who are the protectors of the Vice President. Well, in this shared universe, it's Youngblood, who are the government-sponsored superhero team of the Image Comics universe. And so we have now our crossover between Wildcats and Youngblood. And this is a pretty spiffy looking drawing of Youngblood here. And yeah, it looks good. And here Quayle Damonite asks Maul, so tell me, Gifted One, just how stupid are you? And Maul says, oh, Spartan, I think we got trouble. And indeed they do. And then we switch to this character, the Gnome, who was introduced in issue number 1 as well. And it seems like he's got a master plan in the background that's going exactly as he planned. All the players have gathered on the stage for the final act. And then he's got his own additional players to send in, the Triad. And this is them on screen here, Slag, Attica and Harm. So the Gnome concludes, with those pathetic fools fighting amongst themselves, the orb will be unguarded. Finally, my long and patient vigil will be rewarded. Then the power supreme shall be mine. So nice final page, nice anchor image here to end the chapter on. And obviously every reader looking forward to a confrontation, a fight between Youngblood and Wildcats in issue number 3, which at this point was slated to be the final issue of the miniseries, but that would not turn out to be the case. And then a nice little addition at the end of the issue, which is a 4-page preview of Whilce Portacio's Wetworks, which was due to come out in November. So here we have a nice anchor image here of Commander Dane being shot at by these guys. This is a very Howard Chaykin effect here, American flag, where you have the lettering in the background. Letters here by Michael Heisler for the gunshots. And then they're out of ammunition, and then Dane goes into action against them. So very typical Whilce Portacio layout here. Nice looking stuff. Again, the colors kind of fighting the pencils or the inks here. Bit too murky really, but nonetheless appealing work. Look at this. I always remember this, the violence of this image. Basically breaking the guy's jaw here and losing some teeth into the bargain. And then the final page here of the rest of the Wetworks team arriving, and one of them asking Dane, "You all right, boss?" And he says, this kind of jargon, guff, BZ gesture, meaning excellent. You really made a mess this time though. And then the conclusion, no, not really. So quite the advertisement in terms of what Wetworks, what you could expect it to be. Ultra violent, yes. Look at the head splat here on the back wall. So there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on issue number 2 of Jim Lee's WildC.A.T.s. If you enjoyed the video, please like it in YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.